What does it look like when you are uh, creating this relationship with these autonomous beings in your household that are very different from each other, but that are growing up in a respectful way? You're not being a dictator as a mom, but you're also, there is discipline, and that's a fine balance. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you figure out how to parent one child, I would say, first of all, you never fully figure it out, but also you've only figured out that child. And just like in health, the blueprint that worked for me is not going to be directly applied and work for you. It's so true with our kids as well. I do think like I said, there's like a sliding scale. You're right. Kids, especially little ones, need to understand boundaries because toddlers are wired to figure out where the boundaries are because that creates a feeling of safety. But the inverse of that is teenagers are wired to become independent. Like that's wired into their biology and it's important. So the same boundaries that make a toddler feel safe are going to make a teenager want to push against them because that's what they're wired. And so it's learning that scale and shifting that balance within the different ages in between so that the same boundaries that help them feel safe as a toddler now are not a source of rebellion when they're teenagers. On a practical level, for me, this looks like if we're operating from the principle that they're each their own infinite autonomous being, that means that it would actually be an insult to their autonomy for me to do everything for them once they're capable of doing it. So at the younger ages, this looks like evaluating based on their own ability and capacity at the time, but what are they actually capable of doing if I'm not trying to be a control freak and manage every aspect of their life, and then keeping the rule for myself that I won't do things for them once they're capable of doing it. And I always give the caveat because moms will get upset. That doesn't mean I don't braid my daughter's hair just because they're capable of braiding it. That's still a bonding activity. So like connection exempt from that rule, but that means that by age 4, my kids have been able to do their own laundry. And so they do. And I don't do it for them because they're capable. And it would be an insult to them for me to by my actions infer that I'm better at that than they are just because I'm an adult. And so in those little ways, as they're capable, handing off the responsibility and that ownership and that power for these things in their daily lives to them that help build their autonomy and their self-sufficiency and their ownership of those pieces of their lives. We also have a saying in our house, I think it's from Spider-Man actually originally, that with great power comes great responsibility, but I reverse it. And I tell them from a young age, with great responsibility comes great power. And we have very open conversations. I'm like, I have no desire to restrict your freedom, your ability, your autonomy. And in fact, I want to be your biggest supporter. I will always be in your corner for that. And to the degree that you show me through your actions that you are responsible, you will get the freedom that correlates to that because I have no desire to limit you. And I think the conversations around that and the fact that since a very young age, they've been able to be responsible for aspects of their lives and learn by trial and error in small ways and occasionally ruining a load of laundry, but then learning how to fix it, they have more confidence in their ability to make good decisions. And so by the time my oldest 3 as teenagers now have very few boundaries and rules that I enforce, and I find they actually are more disciplined within themselves than I would be externally if I were making the rules. But they're getting to make those choices. I also think with kids at any age, anytime a choice comes internally from them versus externally regulated or mandated from me, it's a more powerful choice. So even when it comes to like food decisions, I try to build that in from a young age. And so I do often get asked, like, what does the food situation look like in your house? And do you let your kids eat things when they're out other places? And so I try to approach that from a first principles way as well and say, I look at the breakdown of responsibility there. Like as their parent, I'm responsible for making sure in our house we have enough nutrient dense food available when they're hungry. Even from a young age, they're responsible for listening to their bodies and eating when they're hungry and not eating when they're not hungry. So we don't have battles around finishing the food on their plate. If they tell me they're not hungry, I trust them. Even if what they're actually saying is, I don't like this food that you made for dinner, they still have the option not to eat it because I want them to learn to listen to their bodies, not to be mandated by me what they eat or don't eat. And the other part of that is that when they're not here, like I'm not going to make junk food in our house, but if they're not in my house, it's their responsibility to decide what they're going to eat or not eat. So I don't label foods as bad. I don't mandate that they can never eat a cupcake at a birthday party. They get to make those choices. And just like with ruining a load of laundry, sometimes they choose to eat something I would not have prepared at home. and they don't feel great. And then they get that data on their own body and they learn from a young age. And I think my hope in that is that it also avoids creating rebellion or anything around food where it's enticing only because it's forbidden. Like I think back as a just a funny topical example, I wasn't allowed to get my ears pierced until I was 13. And so piercings became much more appealing than they otherwise would have been. And when I was 18, at one point, I think I had 33 piercings. And then I realized one day, like these hurt. I can't sleep on my ear for 6 months after I get these. Why do I don't actually like them? Why do I keep doing this? And realized it was because I wasn't allowed to. And so I've been aware of that in trying not to create false dichotomies or artificial reasons that my kids would want to push back against something, or sort of like not creating the inverse by trying to create the good thing. And so I think those little decisions actually are the most meaningful when they're youngest, because they're wired for independence as they get older. And yours are older than mine. So I know you've seen this even to a further degree than I have. And so realizing if we wait till they're teenagers to start trying to have those conversations and hand off their independence to them, we've already missed the window where they actually want to listen to us and they want to help around the house and they want to learn those things and they care what we say, and that it's natural and healthy and good that they want to be independent when they're teenagers. So not waiting until that point to start instilling all of these things.
Oh my gosh, we have so much in common. I was not allowed to get my ears pierced except until I was 10. However, I had a haircut that made me look like a boy. So at 9 years old, my mom finally let me get my ears pierced. So with my girls, I actually, when I said, when you're ready to take care of your ears, I'm happy to go with you and I'll get an extra one pierced, an extra piercing with you. And we did. With the food, first of all, with the laundry, I want to commend you. My kids all do their laundry, but it wasn't at 4 years old. That is phenomenal. My two kids are in college, and both kids, when they went as a freshman, the amount of kids in that freshman dorm that have never done a load of laundry it was huge. And my kids were the ones teaching them how to do their laundry. My kids all do their laundry now. And the food thing, all three of my kids had health issues when they were young, and they were very different. One had learning issues, one had gut issues, and my son had leukemia. So three very different issues, but it was those three separate issues that I used as tools to teach them why we want to take care of our body and the food we eat, and taking that time to teach the kids about food and why, because I don't think a lot of kids out there know why you don't want to eat processed foods. They just know that that's normal, and the person to their left and right are eating those processed foods at lunch, so that's normal and that's what we should do. But when you teach them, they then connect the brain and body, the health, the way they feel to the food. And then that ownership is there. And it's not just blaming it on mom or dad, that I'm not allowed to eat this or I'm allowed to eat this. And I had my kids make their lunches since they were very young in elementary school. And there was one day when my son brought his lunch home, and he had hardly eaten any of it, and it was fourth grade. And I said, "Oh, bud, you got to eat your lunch." And he said, "Mom, at least I don't throw it away like all of my friends." So their friends had no connection to their food, right? They made their parents sent their lunch with them. They threw it away so they could go play on the playground, or they stole the other kids, candy bar in their lunch, and that was it. There was no connection from body to food and health. There was none of that was being taught. And then these kids then go off to college, and they're eating in the dorm or in the cafeterias, they're drinking, they're doing all of this stuff. And whereas my kids, I'm not saying my kids are perfect and that they don't go eat the processed foods and drink once in a while or whatever, but they think through their decision. They feel their body. They will understand when they eat too much sugar, how it makes them feel. And there's this connection so that they're in charge. I grew